everybody. Welcome to another interview episode of Games My Mom Found. I am Mike Albertin, and who's with me tonight?
Hi, my name is Daniel Cabuco, and I'm a 25-year veteran of the game industry. I've worked for Crystal Dynamics, worked with Codemasters, and currently working at Sony PlayStation.
Nice. And thank you again for joining me tonight.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, first thing because I hadn't found you actually in a Legacy of Kain group, because one of the positions that at least I feel like you're probably well known for, you were the art director on Legacy of Kain Defiant.
Yes, that's right. I was lead character designer for the first two games.
Oh, for Soul Reaver and Soul Reaver 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All the good ones.
Yeah.
I mean, Blood Omen 1 is a good game. I didn't enjoy it, but it's a really good game.
Well, sure. There was a definite transition that had to happen between Blood Omen and Soul Reaver.
Oh, yeah. And Soul Reaver is still a really good PlayStation 1 game.
I'm glad it holds up. I really do.
I played it last year for the podcast. We did an episode about it, which is my first introduction to that series. And even playing it in 2020, it's still a very good game.
Yeah, the dialogue, the art, the concepts, the ability to actually put in like what I consider fun and interesting ideas and art all held up, which is fantastic.
One of the first things I wanted to ask you is, how did you first get into working with the game industry?
Sure. Okay, so I was first going to school in Pasadena at the Art Center College of Design, and I responded to an ad for someone looking to make a Nintendo game. So this dates me a little bit, but this is back in the Super Nintendo days, and a company called Technocrest hired me to help them translate a game from the Nintendo 64 to the Sega Genesis, and it was a game called Lufia. It was a really cool Japanese game. Now, a lot of stuff happened, and unfortunately, I don't think the translation ever really fully took place, but I did learn a lot about video games at that time, including like all of the restrictions that went into making 8-bit games for consoles because of their extremely limited power. As long as you stuck to the rules, it was really amazing to stick in there. And after that company started to fold, and so I looked around and found Novalogic in Calabasas, and went there and worked on Armored Fist and Comanche, F-22 Raptor, a lot of other military games, because that's another hobby of mine is I like military vehicles, and it was fun to get in there and actually be able to model up, and create textures for military vehicles on both the West and the East. Okay. And after that, I basically got into Crystal Dynamics to work on Soul Reaver.
Nice. Were you? I did want to ask you. Had you played Blood Omen 1 before you got involved with Soul Reaver?
I did. I played Blood Omen back when it came out, and I remember grabbing it at E3 and playing it with a controller, and just being interested in certain aspects of it and being slightly disappointed in other aspects of it. I liked the gothic nature of it, the dialogue, the voice acting, some of the abilities you had, but I felt the graphics could have been better, especially having worked in 8-bit and knowing all the rules. When you have like a console with a lot more power, you're just like, wow, you could have done so much more, but it just depends on which angle you're coming at it from. I came from a very restricted angle and then seeing it as a huge opening. Some people come at it from a very high angle and saying, oh, look at all the way the graphics are restricted and things we can't do. So if you come at it from the top, you're basically not going to see many possibilities. But if you come at it from the bottom, where you're basically like, oh, I wish I could have done this, I wish I could have done that. When you get to a console with more power, suddenly all of your possibilities open up and you start seeing more than you can do. So point of view is really important.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Oh, and as I was saying, as I know in your IMDb, you're an art director. What does an art director do? Partly, I know a little, but not much.
Sure. So I like to say that an art director is several roles, but it's mainly like herding cats. You basically take the written design, no matter how vague, and basically organize it into data that can be acted upon. For example, if someone gives you a high concept, my job is to take that high concept and turn it into a viable artistic creation, which is firstly using concept design and art, all the artists there to sort of suss out the ideas and design and visual design rather, and look of everything, and then to work with the team to build the 3D look of the entire game. So every aspect is covered, from environment to character, backstory, user interface, effects, all those things that are touched by the art director in terms of vision and look. And I coordinate with the creative director, lead designer, lead animator, everybody in the team, sound, effects, basically to create a cohesive look and design. So it's sort of like being a conductor more than anything else. You establish the look and the feel, and you basically conduct an orchestra to get the piece created in harmony.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I mean, it sounds like a lot though. But I mean, it goes a lot in making a game. I know that from what I've seen.
Oh, absolutely. It's really grown from what it was before, and it takes a lot of efforts on a lot of different people and a lot of teamwork as well. I like to say that it's not just one person doing any of this stuff. A lot of times a single person gets a credit for a game or something like that, but honestly, it's a huge team and a huge team effort. I see my artists sort of like my instruments in terms of like being able to coordinate them and get the best out of them. My job isn't to, get in there and do the work for them. There's a very funny term, but I won't repeat it here because it's a dirty word, but pixel effing, basically. You don't do that because the artist will never learn, and all you're doing is exercising your ego. What you want to do is nurture a team and bring them about. So a lot of times you are working to make what's best for the team happen. So you're part coach, part counselor, part cheerleader, part designer and guide. A lot of red penning, a lot of drawing over stuff, but you give up a lot of your own personal input in terms of like direct creation in order to affect the greater look of the game. And it's a very sacrificial role in that aspect.
Okay. Do you get a lot of the final say as an art director, or are you just kind of finding out what works the best?
Yes and no. It depends on how involved the other leads are in it. For example, if the creative director is heavily vested in some aspect of the character's look, then you would have to bounce with the ideas off of that creative director so that you get the final say. However, if it's something minor, like what a wagon wheel looks like, that's probably something that the buck will stop with someone like me.
Okay. What was your favorite game to work on so far in your career?
Oh, there's a lot.
I know you have done a lot, but
there's a lot of games. Really okay, yeah. So I really enjoyed Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver because that was basically me putting out the things that I enjoyed into the game. Everything I loved, all the gothic design and art, all of the anime and manga influence type stuff at the time, which is the 90s. So it was very much more like dark and violent type stuff. The gothic designs, everything from that, I got to pour into it and really enjoy and have fun with. I really enjoyed working on Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well because I got to work with a guy named James Goddard, D. James, who was a game designer for Capcom who did a lot of stuff for Street Fighter, including he designed characters for Super Street Fighter, like the new characters that were added, Fei Long, Cammy, and DJ, and T-Hawk. And basically, he was a great little designer who could basically get in there and create frame advantages and knew exactly how to apply 2D frame advantages to 3D. So he and I worked really closely together with the animators to capture the stunt coordinator's actions for Buffy. And being a fan of the show at the time, getting a chance to meet the stunt people and understanding where they came from. And I have a slight martial arts background. I've taken a few classes and getting to meet this crew and understand where they came from, the lineage of their martial arts background, which kind of goes back across the Inosanto lines and across the Hong Kong lines. It was pretty great to see and do, and that was a lot of fun. And even stuff like Rise of the Argonauts was a lot of fun too, because it's like kind of changing the traditional perception of Greek storylines. And the most recent one that I had a lot of fun with, at least on my own, was Lost Planet 3, because I had a really great crew and everybody was fantastic that worked on it. And then I've worked on a bunch of Sony projects recently, but I've been a little more removed in my input on that stuff because there's so many people involved. But I will say Death Stranding was fun to work on because I got to meet a lot of really famous people and scan them, so that was great.
I've yet to play that, but it looks amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sure is interesting how it worked. And story about a global pandemic and a delivery man. How relevant is that?
It's very relevant.
I know. It's like when it came out, we're like, what is this? And then everything happened. Like, oh, I get it.
Hey, it's Kojima. I mean, I was playing Metal Gear Solid 2, and I know there's like a prediction in there about how the internet will take over and people will trust what they see without being verified. I'm like, that's funny.
Well, even the rise of private armies was something that he predicted, which is happening now, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Well, did you get to meet Kojima when you worked on?
Several. Oh yeah, we worked together several times. He's a really nice guy. So I'll say that there are almost two sides to Kojima. On the one side, when you first meet him and you're just kind of parallel to him as a person, he's a really nice guy, super humble, hardworking, and really just amazing. And if you work with him professionally, he's very exacting in his standards. He knows exactly what he wants. He knows exactly how to get there. And he will hold your feet to it if you don't match that vision. So he can be demanding in that respect, but it's professional demanding. It's respectful. It's not like he will put you down or like that, but he will demand the best from you because he knows what he wants.
Yeah, he seems like. I mean, I love all his games.
Yeah. It's why they're so good. I mean, I say that one person gets all the credit and it shouldn't be the case, but Kojima does get credit for creating really unique storylines, really unique character designs, and just neat situations and being really prescient in terms of knowing what's going to happen in the future, what's going to be important, which is really cool.
Oh, but on the Rise of Argonauts theme, were you able? With it not being a new IP, were you able to really kind of direct how the characters looked and kind of like the style they were going for?
Yeah, that took a little bit of time because when I got to them, they had already done their vertical slice, and it was really odd in terms of like some of the choices they had made. So I just kind of adjusted a little bit, adjust the design from what they had had. But yeah, it was Rise of the Argonauts basically had a really cool kind of just features that we kind of enjoyed bringing up. Taking things like Greek theater masks and designing those into the enemy soldiers. Those guys were originally just one group of enemies, and we liked them so much we started using them everywhere because, first of all, you'd have to have any facial animation, which was nice. And then secondly, they were just cool. Greek theater masks are very disturbing. I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and there was one episode where these people just walked around in Greek theater masks, and it just terrified me as a kid. So I'm a Fourth Doctor kind of guy. So yeah, okay. It scared me, considering because the nature of the show was more like theater because of the way it was shot and the way it was lit. So it just really brought home that disturbing feeling. And so I used that feeling to kind of draw upon it for the designs for the enemies. And then taking things like, the traditional creatures like, Pan or Hercules might look like, and kind of adjusting that to just, different proportions, different designs, just changing people's expectations. We're told as a mandate to just challenge the traditional expectation.
I know like the design of Hercules, he's like just hugely buff, but it fits the character.
That's what was really cool. Would be. Yeah. It was fun too because we actually enabled his hand to have the same property as a mace, so that sometimes when you see him kill somebody, he'll actually explode their head. Oh. The same as your mace does, because it basically has the same properties.
That is cool. Were you a fan of Greek mythology before you worked on the game?
Absolutely. I don't think you can get into this industry without being a fan of some kind of mythology. I'm a big Dungeons and Dragons nerd. I've followed Greek mythology since I was young. Love the stories, love the lessons behind them, and I love their understanding just how it always didn't end with a happy ending. It always had some kind of crazy punishment involved. So like Prometheus, or just how everybody was in some way had a tragedy behind it, and that was fun to kind of delve into. And I like the design of the Greeks. It's the basis for a lot of design that we use up until recently, up until modernism. Yeah, Greek design was used a lot in architecture. Even today, the way we do our proportion system is based on Greek design. So golden mean and all that kind of stuff. So it's knowing those kind of thoughts that went into their stories and their visual design. It's all dessert for me. It's like just a lot of fun.
I've always loved the mythology too. That's what drew me to that game when I randomly just picked it up. I've actually bought it like 4 times.
Oh, really? You 4 times?
I only played it once, but I bought it on different systems. When I find like a used game store, I bought it on Steam. I keep meaning to go back to it because it stuck with me. It's been, must have been over 7 years since I played it, but it's one of those things where I remember enjoying myself. I don't remember much about the game. It's just something that I had a good time with. It's something I want to go back to.
I'm glad. We worked really hard on the combat system and making sure that there was a lot of fun to be had in the game, and that when you get in the Argo, it basically is this ship of wonder. And at the time, we didn't have technology to put like 1,000 men on it that were all rowing, so we had to change it somehow. But it was sort of taking cues from Mass Effect and other types of games along that line to kind of create different islands and different places to visit. Finding color schemes that worked for each of the gods and then assigning their islands accordingly. There's a lot of tie-ins visually and symbologies that we created. I basically laid out a lot of mandates that said, look, this island, this god, this color, this symbol, reinforce it, and then so, Sparta and Ares being aligned, just those kind of ideas was really important.
It's definitely one that I've been talking about doing on the show at some point because I want to have a reason to go back and play it again.
Yeah, it's great. It's a lot of fun to work on, We got to change some things around, of course, that would normally be part of traditional and kind of were irreverent in our changes. But at the same time, if you just do the same thing that everybody was expecting, you're probably not going to have something interesting because everybody just knows it already. And, you had to try to put something different in there.
One thing I wanted to ask you, I also saw you worked on Lost Planet 3. Unfortunately, a title I've never dived into yet, but I played the first one and I liked the series. But I wanted to ask you, are you a fan of kaijus and mechs in that type of world?
Absolutely. I mean, that's my second love, right? Since I was a kid, I was into manga and anime. I liked it before it was cool. No, everybody really liked it. And Yeah, it was one of those games where we got a chance to do everything. We got to do creatures and mechs and a different planet. That's all fantasy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is there's no downsides to this. It's all amazing. So Lost Planet 3 is actually a sort of a prequel to the first one, where we go back to the ice planet. Because of the second one, it all got terraformed and warmed up. But what we did was one thing I loved about the Lost Planet was to try to explain the ecology of a place. I don't try to just create a creature and there's a creature is attacking you. I try to think about ecology. Being a big Dungeons and Dragons nerd, I always read Ecology of a Dragon magazine to try and understand like how something like a beholder would live or something like that. So what we did was for the creatures, the acrid they're called. I was like, how could the acrid survive if you melt their planet and they become like these creatures that suddenly adapted to like sands and oceans and things like that. So I went back and I said, okay, what if the acrid had all the DNA they ever needed to survive? Like every single kind of acrid that you ever see, all their DNA is combined into one embryo, and whatever it needs to survive to adapt, it uses that DNA at the time, which creates wild variances. But that's how hardy they are as survivors. It's almost like the Thing, where every single cell is like fighting to survive. Of course, once we did that, it became a lot easier to create creatures that suddenly had massive adaptation routines. And so in the ice planet, we can go back and say, okay, what kind of creatures would survive here? What would they become like? What would the overall design idea be? And one thing we thought about is basically creating an ecology, creating a world that lived on ice. So anything that created heat was food. And creatures were designed to sense heat. So every creature didn't need to see well. It didn't need to hear that well. It just needed to sense heat. All the creatures have some of them are blind, but they just sense heat. And so anything that creates heat, like mechs or your spaceship or your base or your body, suddenly is food. And so that's how you'd survive in a world like that. And it's one of those things where I kind of got inspiration from another artist. His name is slipping me right now, but he basically created a book that basically talked about how you could create an ecology based on what the environment presented first.
It's what they needed to survive. They would end up finding essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It basically creates that idea that if you're going to create a planet, everything has to follow and possibly live in that world. So everything we're creating now, or created for that series of games, is basically designed to live in that world. There are ambushing types, there are stalking types, there are high flyers, there are pack hunters. All of those things we kind of looked up on the Earth, basically insect and animal, and applied those to the acrid in Lost Planet 3.
Okay.
And for the mechs, we had working with Capcom was really fun, but it's also a little difficult. That the Japanese have a very strict aesthetic for mech, which is very different from the West's aesthetic for mech. For example, I keep hearing from Japanese people that they hate the power loader from Aliens, but that's one of my favorite designs. Resolving that issue was a lot of fun because we got to do all kinds of shape design with them and talk to them about silhouettes before even going into the final design. So our mech designer, John Park, he's an amazing designer, amazing. He did hundreds and hundreds of silhouettes for us. And because of that, we were able to create a design language that they could both like that would kind of be filled with details that we liked in the West. The mech that you have it's subconsciously designed to look like someone with a backpack on, a Sherpa with a backpack on. And that basic design is what we use, like a T-shaped design. And based on that, the Japanese were happy. And then after we got into it and started adding pistons, and all the different grungy things that we liked, then it became more appealing to Western eyes too.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It's one of those, it looks very cool from what I've seen of the game. I remember when it first came out and it grabbed my interest. I really liked the first Lost Planet. I was excited to see you guys go back to the Snow Planet again. Cool, but snow again.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I do like that in my games. And one of the things I feel like you're also very known for is because you were as I said earlier, you were the art director on Legacy of Kain, Defiance, and then you worked on the Soul Reaver games. Mm-hmm. But one of my big questions I want to ask you is, which one is your favorite, Kain or Raziel?
That's hard. I love them both. I mean, honestly, I don't favor one or the other. Gosh, that's tough.
I know.
I don't think I can pick, to be fair, because each one has their own evolution. Lieutenant Raziel, Human Raziel is all interesting for me. And then Kain's designs were awesome. And I always wanted to go back and do like a younger version of Kain in between Blood Omen 2 and what we have now, the Elder Kain. So it's hard to see. I think I'm a little partial towards Kain just because of his attacks and design and stuff like that are fun. Raziel is also amazing. They move completely differently,
Oh yeah, no. When I played it recently, other than the map issues I had, they both they both handled great, and they both look. I love the design of Kain in Defiance versus like how far he's come and the way that you guys designed him. I thought was really good. I love that elder vampire.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, that design was based on Kain seeing himself as a god king and his body evolving to match that.
It fits Kain though.
So, yeah.
I mean, it was very very egotistic in a way, and I can.
Yeah. Oh, I remember the artist's name that who influenced me on Lost Planet and on Kain a little bit was Douglas Barlow. His designs are amazing, and he did an exploration. He did a planet design that was really cool, and he also did this Dante's Inferno as a visual design. And I like cracked skin type designs, and Barlow was awesome at that. So yeah, it was something that really influenced me when I was designing Kain.
Or were you one of the people who was like personally designing like a lot of the characters, like Raziel or Kain? Or they already kind of like pre how they needed to be at the point when you were taking over?
No, I designed Kain from scratch. I mean, it's basically I took the whole Blood Omen vampire version of Kain. In fact, everything from Blood Omen that came into Soul Reaver was sort of like saying, let's consider Blood Omen the TV version and let's make the movie version of that. So we would kind of up the design by just kind of really stacking on top of it. For example, there was this guy called the Nemesis, right? And he was William the Just, and he became the Nemesis. And basically, his design originally was this red guy with horns, red armor with horns, and it looked really sort of generic to me as a design. And I was like, well, that needs something. It needs some reason to look that way. And so I looked at everything. I thought, so it's got horns and it's red. What's red and has sharp stuff on it? And I thought, oh, roses. Roses have thorns, so you can use black horns as the thorns and roses as petals as the red parts. So then I made him William the Just, the king of roses. And then he transforms into the Nemesis. He still carries that design aesthetic forward, and it works. So it made more sense that way. And that was sort of the things we did. We basically would try to find justification for the designs we had and find ways to push it forward. And for things like Elder Kain, we were like, okay, well, Kain obviously had armor and spells and all kinds of stuff. But when he gets to a certain point, he doesn't need that anymore. He basically incorporates stuff like the bone armor into his own skin. He's largely immune to, direct sunlight now. It still hurts, but his armored skin can resist it. And he has telekinesis and stuff like that, so he can crush you with his hands. He doesn't need spells like Flay or anything like that. And he's got the Soul Reaver too, which is pretty much if he struck you with a full Soul Reaver with Raziel's soul inside of it, your bones would fly out of your body, and then your soul would be devoured. It's like a nuke, so it's a horrible weapon, but it's also it's entirely too powerful for gaming. It's like one hit kills on everything, so that's why we had to change it. It's
still fun in the final game, though. What we got?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I mean it's great. We had to depower it up until the point where Raziel goes inside of it.
And that scene where you get to fight Raziel as Kain was probably definitely one of my favorite moments in a while in games. I was surprised when not often you can say the antagonist fights the protagonist fights the antagonist.
Yeah, it was sort of the protagonist fighting the protagonist too, because you had to play them as both. So it was one of the first times someone had done something like that. I mean, other games have done it subsequently. I mean, even Last of Us 2 does that now. But back then, it was really fun to be able to create those two different points of view, set them against each other, and then fight in that way, and then see what kind of powers they would have and what kind of abilities would matter. It's just a lot of fun.
And neither character really felt like the villain. I mean, they're both had their problems, but it was just interesting the way it was in that game.
Yeah, I think it was one of the first games to present villainy and heroism as points of view, as opposed to like strict rules of, the hero is absolute good and the villain is absolute evil. It became one of those more gray areas where, depending on your point of view, you could see either one of them being right. And Raziel was a zealot, right? He was a zealot who basically jumped from point of view to point of view, but with absolute certainty with his point of view, which is where he eventually learned that, oh God, I'm just being an idiot about this whole thing. He was a zealot as a human, he was a zealot as a vampire, and he was a zealot as the Soul Reaver. And he would, only at the end did he realize that, there's a balance to a point of view.
And the whole time being manipulated by the Elder God.
Yeah. I think people still have problems understanding some of that stuff, so I'm hoping to be able to clarify a lot of those issues too, and with further discussions, further creations that I'm going to do with the fans.
Involved with the Elder God design?
Yeah, I designed the Elder God. Basically, I painted that room up. The very first room you see him in, I painted that entire room by hand. Every eyeball, every tentacle, and created templates for the other guys to kind of blend it into the rest of the walls in the world, with the idea that he is very active in the spectral realm, but when you go to the material realm, all you see is what he's left behind. So almost like fossils. There are these things called crinoids. They're like these old worms that basically leave behind these really interesting tentacle-looking stones as they fossilize. And it kind of worked for me as a kind of a template for how the Elder God might look in the material world.
That's a very cool design, and just, I love the idea of this. This is what's manipulating everything with the vampires, and it, if I remember correctly, manipulated what happened with the Highlands too for the humans. It's been a couple weeks since I played, but it was very cool to me.
It's true. It's a demiurge, basically. It's the equivalent of someone coming in and saying, "I'm God," and whispering to you and saying, "This is the word of God," but it's not God. It's something else. It's a demiurge. And to understand demiurges, you have to understand the Gnostic hero's journey. And if you understand that, all this stuff comes into play. Everything that we have in Soul Reaver follows a Gnostic hero's journey. So if you even just read about it, you'll see, oh, okay, I get it. So the demiurge is, is the elder god. The Gnostic hero is Raziel, and he's destined to, sacrifice himself at some point. So it was interesting because we were able to bring all that stuff into play in an interesting way.
All right, and then do you have a favorite Legacy of Kain game out of the series?
Oh, gosh, it's hard to say. I really enjoyed the world of the first one just because I love the City of Lost Children aesthetic we were able to put. Like the lost technology that was almost industrial, like the cusp of industrialization before it fell apart, before it all fell down. And the vampires being able to carry that forward because they're immortal, so they can basically create more advanced designs following those initial human designs. Also, the difference in architecture between vampire and human was really interesting. We made the vampire aesthetic much more advanced, based it on late Arabic, and the humans were still based on early medieval. So there was a lot of differences there, which were really fun to put in. Unlike if you lived a few thousand years or a few hundred years rather, you'd have a much different aesthetic than you would if you were just 25 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, each game has something I love about it, right? I loved painting Raziel, his textures on the second game, and then when I became an art director, I'd let all of that go. I'd basically just let someone else do it, and basically just direct them from. It's almost like painting with a pair of robot arms, almost, and saying, like, "Hey, do this, do that." So it's not exactly what you would have done, but it's also interesting in its own way.
Yeah, Soul Reaver was a really good game. Definitely one that stood out for me too.
Yeah, we were able to do a lot of cool things. I think just being able to go on the Spectral on PlayStation 1 was really something new. Like, people just had never seen something like that before. Being able to actually switch between worlds in real time on the fly without loading was something that no one ever thought was possible.
I'm assuming it probably pushed it a bit to its limits for what PS1 could do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, we only had 4 megabytes of RAM. So we had to be constantly streaming everything in and out of that poor little disk drive that I think it's a 2-speed disk drive or even 1-speed. I forget how slow the PlayStation 1 disk drive was. But there's no hard drive, so we had to just constantly be streaming it. I think if the engineers had known how difficult it would be to create that technology, they wouldn't have done it. but they jumped into it. We understood working within those limitations was fun too. Like understanding, there's a lot of things we did to kind of create the look for Spectral that were efficient. We did vertex painting. We stored 2 different vertex colors. And so when you went from material to Spectral, we just swapped those vertex colors and kept the textures fairly desaturated so they could be influenced both by the colors of the vertexes. So instead of painting in a bunch of color, we left it fairly towards the desaturated side. And that way it allowed us to create really detailed textures because we could drop it to 4-bit instead of having 8-bit textures, which took up less memory. So they're essentially, I wouldn't say grayscale, but close to it. And with 4-bit color, we were able to make a lot of textures in 4 megabytes. So that was fun. And we were able to create stuff that people hadn't seen on PlayStation. Like most of the time, one level has a set of tiles, and that's it. So people take one level, one set of tiles, and you'd see it repeated everywhere. Whereas we were trying to work against that so hard, we would stream in new textures all the time and really try to make those areas look different from each other as you ran around them. Blending them together, creating like little areas that, extended the streaming time so you had time to load levels. So that's why the hallways are really long and windy sometimes, or there's a door you have to look almost straight down on with the camera. It's because we're loading.
That makes sense. I mean, that's become a normal thing in game, but even when I played Legacy Soul Reaver for the first time last year, it still looks good. I mean, it's a PlayStation 1 game, but it didn't age as bad as some games I played PS1 that just don't work as well.
Yeah, well, just being able to create like a more detailed stone texture with a really cool sculpture and carving into it was something that hadn't been done before, really, on PlayStation. But the most detailed looks in games back then were like Resident Evil which was pre-rendered in backgrounds. Final Fantasy, but that had just a lot of tiles and it was a different point of view. It was like a different camera angle. So doing something from a action-adventure third-person point of view is one of the most challenging ways to make a game. And we really worked hard to get a look that no one else had ever seen before. A mature look, too. Again, most PlayStation games had they weren't dark and gritty like they are now. They were like really fun, almost mobile-type games that you see today.
Crash Bandicoot Spyro would have been around this time, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Crash and
Stuff that's
Spyro.
more mascotty, that would have been friendlier.
Yeah, and we used Gex's engine, which was funny. But
I never played Gex, but I think I want to keep it that way, though.
Yeah, it's a snarky, fun game, but based on movies, so it's kind of interesting that way.
One thing that surprised me in Defiance is that I was really happy to see that you guys brought back one of the vampires, the one that was missing from the end in Soul River. Well,
Terrell.
Missing, but yeah.
yeah, no, everybody was wondering what happened to Terrell, and being able to bring him back was one of the joys of my career. And we were always sad that we didn't have time to make him in the original game. So having him in there was a lot of fun. And we had to change the design, of course. It just didn't fit the design that we had originally with the dam and all that kind of stuff. But we were able to build something that I think was like really cool in its own way.
Yeah, I think there were either 4 or 5 brothers. They were all very unique when I remember them. Like one was like very bug orientated, and so we were one. Wasn't one like a stone statue or something?
Yeah, it was a giant.
Yeah,
giant vampire with armor. Another one was made up of an amalgamation of bodies.
that was gross, but good.
yeah. And one was a giant sea monster. So
yeah, that was an interesting fight from what I remember of that first game.
yeah. Developing strengths in one area and weaknesses in the other. It was interesting fun.
Yeah, but it made me so happy to finally be able to kill that last one and get the last ability. It kind of like everything came around, which is what I really liked about Defiance, was seeing the host. I mean, the series kind of wrapped up, essentially. I mean, I know that there hasn't been another one in a while.
Right.
I don't think there will be, I'm assuming.
Well, nothing's in the works now, as far as I know. But I'm keeping it alive because like I said, I just opened a Patreon. So just doing that so we can create some illustrations and ideas and some really fun things for the fans.
And I saw some of your Patreon. Oh, would you want to? Because I'm going to put a link in the show notes for that at the end of this.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Of course. Oh, you want to give a shout out to your Patreon where people can find you at?
Yeah, it's called Sanctuary of Kain, and it's on Patreon. Basically, it's got illustrations for mine. We're going to be setting up a Discord channel for talking to fans, taking polls on what kind of artwork you want to see next from me. Also, we're talking about creating some merchandise, so T-shirts, pins, those kind of things that people would want to have. And also maybe even getting a little into 3D design, because I have a few friends that I've worked with to try and redesign some of these things. And, a few surprises out there for people who sign up. And also including original design sketches, too, and sending those out as scans.
Nice.
So I've opened up the sketchbooks and, I did a ton of drawings for those games. So just opening those up and sending out those sketches as well.
Hey, you're keeping the series alive in a way. I mean, a lot of people love Legacy of Kain. When I first covered them in 2019, the first Blood Omen, I had never really had seen the series before. And as I've delved into the series for the show, people love Legacy of Kain. There's a huge fan base out there.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. I'm really happy about the fandom is amazing. And I think it's something that happened that people responded to was that we assumed intelligence on the part of the player. We assumed that they understood certain concepts that we might not typically expect, or were exposed to, could understand things, like from the prose of the way that people spoke to the references to the Gnostic hero's journey, demiurges, ideas of good and evil, just the gray area in between, just putting all those things out there and assuming the player had the intelligence to both understand it, the maturity to read it and read into it, see the symbologies, and I just layered the hell out of everything. I put meaning in almost everything in that game. And there's symbology and meaning that basically you'll miss it the first time you play it through, but on a second or third time, you might see it on a forum, you might see it, you're rewarded for investigating.
Oh, were you involved in the canceled project Dead Sun at all?
No, I was not.
Okay. I know that got canceled, but I've looked up, there's like a trailer online of it or some gameplay, and it definitely did look interesting.
It was an interesting concept of what they were trying to do, and I understand fully why they would want to do things a certain way. I think the execution was a little rough. Looking at their world, their spectral world was a little strange, and how they tried to introduce the character was also strange. It felt like Shadow of Mordor is what it felt like, but not quite as refined in terms of execution. So I could see the potential of it, but also it's the same thing that has happened a number of times. Is when you create a new character, don't kill off the other characters to do it. It's
Yeah.
The original Miles Morales comic book did that, which pissed off a lot of people. In the Spider-Verse did it much better, like where they ease into they killed off Peter Parker, but they brought back another Peter Parker, so it was fine. But in the comic books, they just killed off Peter Parker. That was like that sudden switch is like, wait, what? And everybody sort of reacted against it. So
makes people angry when you kill off their favorite characters.
Yeah, I mean, why? It's like, why would you do that? It's like there's opportunities for mentorship, opportunities for creativity there. There's no reason for it to be adversarial. At least I don't think so.
And one question that I did want to ask you is, what is your favorite game or like your style of game that you really like to play?
Oh, I like action adventure third person single player games. Horizon Zero Dawn is one of my favorite games, just because it was so much more than I expected it to be. So much more, and I expected a lot out of it. But it was so much fun to set up traps and to kind of outsmart the dinosaurs, and even the other people. It's fun to fight too, and just being able to stalk and hunt is just fun.
It's an amazing game.
Yeah, it was great. Let's see. I'm a little biased because some of these games I've worked on, but yeah.
But that's hey, that is still stuff that you enjoy playing. So
yeah, love Final Fantasy, Streets of Rage, StarCraft. Just trying to think about all the games I've been playing. It's like Ghost of Tsushima. It's amazing. A lot of fun there. Yeah, those are all like really fun games to get into. I like third person type of games. God of War, of course. The new God of War is amazing. Played that through twice. Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man game I was a big fan of the Spider-Man 2 game when it came out on PlayStation. I played that all the way through. Got 100% on it. And when the new Insomniac game came out and they had the exact same feel of the web swinging, like it just felt that good, but even better actually, I was like, they got it. They nailed the most basic thing about a Spider-Man game that you have to nail, and that's traversal.
Which is hard to do, but that Insomniac game was something else. Yeah,
they were fortunate because they had experience from Sunset Overdrive, which made them a natural fit for that game. And once they had that going, it was just, spiraling upwards. They just did so much amazing stuff for that game. But yeah, there are fundamentals to gaming. There are fundamentals to traversal, fundamentals to combat that you need to nail. If you don't, it'll feel bad moment to moment, and no one's going to play your game.
Yeah, it won't be fun then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are principles to that.
And the last question I want to ask you is, what has been your favorite project to work on or something that's really stayed with you? I mean, I know part of the answer, I think, but
Well, besides Soul Reaver, I think, one game I worked on that really, unfortunately, didn't get made, but I loved working on it was Highlander.
Oh, you worked on the Highlander game?
There was a Highlander game we were going to come out with.
Yes, for 360 era, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it came out.
Sorry, I'm a big fan of Highlander, so I did not know that.
So am I. No, so am I. It was huge. We were basically put everything I had into that one because I was such a Highlander fan. And it was supposed to come out, right around the same time as the first Batman Arkham Asylum game, maybe a little bit later. And unfortunately, it didn't get made due to rough contract negotiations with the rights holders. But it was through IDOS, and it was going to be an awesome, we had so much going on with it. We were able to create this thing called a memory echo. And I might release video of this just at some point because it's old. It's all old now. I know it's all canceled. But basically, we had this ability to we added a little bit more to the lore, like being able to absorb another immortal's memories.
Oh.
So we say you wanted to find out where an immortal's weapons cache was after you killed him, you would have the ability to create a sphere around the player that would change the environment to what it looked like hundreds of years ago and sort of create what's called a memory echo. And using that, you could walk around and in real time, the world would change around you. So if you were in modern day Manhattan or something like that, you go back to the old days when it was first built and see the old wooden docks and things like that. We did it with Japan in Osaka.
And
it was a lot of fun because and the main character's memories too.
That is the most disappointed of any game that I have followed that's been canceled with this one. I was so bummed when I found out it got canceled.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, I was so into it. So like I said, I put my heart and soul into that game, and that was one of my favorite ones to have worked on. And we used some of that technology for Lost Planet 3. Yeah, there was a huge thing going on with. Actually, I can send you a link too if you want to see what some people talking about it on the Highlander podcast. My old CEO actually ended up talking about it, which kind of opens up the doors. And I have so many drawings and designs, so many great artists that have gone on to work on Marvel MCU stuff. They're just great artists, and there was so much to it that I loved working on. Yeah, but there was other. I had that there's other game that I've hated working on. I've loved working on all the games that I worked on. Buffy was fantastic. I really enjoyed the creature design we got to do there, being able to run around and recreate these characters that I loved, and everything has just been. I feel just super lucky that I'm not bitter about the game industry at all. I've actually had a really good run, and really, I'm grateful for the people I got to work with. I don't feel like I burned myself out at any point. There were late nights. There have been, but I just feel incredible gratitude for being able to work on these games and bring something to it.
I mean, you definitely have. I mean, like Legacy Kain, as I said, like it's had such a lasting effect on something that you helped design or did design.
Yeah, it was my honor and pleasure to have done that. If I can, get another chance like that, another shot at a game like that, I would count myself like quadruply lucky. And it's just something so rare to be able to put something in a game, especially nowadays when there's such big teams. Back in the day, in the 90s, it was the Wild West. You could shoot from the hip, and your design just made it in the game. But nowadays it's a little different.
Yeah, it's huger projects and more people involved, I'm assuming, from the old days.
Absolutely.
Well, technology has changed so much.
Right, exactly. There's not a lot that we can affect in such a large manner anymore. Concept artists have that ability, which is nice. It's great to look, but they're not going to do the final execution. And 3D artists get the design and get to put stuff in the game, but they also have a lot of input from a lot of other people. So it's just a lot of different back and forths. Not to say that a good game can't be designed and made. Obviously, they're making great games now, so it's just a matter of more coordination and more consensus by a group.
It's gonna be so sad now thinking about the Highlander game again. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, I could. Just hit me up after this. I'll tell you more about it.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand.
I've got so much I can tell you about. Yeah, no,
I can't stop thinking about it. So that's fine.
I love Highlander. Honestly, I love Highlander.
It's a great series. It has meant so much to me over the years. I watched the whole series and just the way that everything was, and I felt that like that show itself did such a good job of showing somebody who had to live like this and the good and the bad of it. Yeah,
exactly. And immortality has always been an interesting subject to me to examine because what we consider normal in our lifetimes would change greatly over the course of immortality. I think Anne Rice said it best that most people don't have the stamina for immortality because you see the world around you where everything's changing and you're just the same, or you have absorbed so many different ideas that by the time a century rolls around, you're such a different person than who you were at the beginning of that century. Hopefully, you've grown, and you're very static. It depends. It just depends on your point of view and what you want to be. So any kind of idea of immortality is interesting to me, like longevity, because what matters to you, what lasts, what you can do, how much power you can build, what your interests are, those all are going to evolve in really interesting ways. So for Highlander, we had all of the immortals basically laid out in like different ways, like different points of view, and then we just extrapolated them ad infinitum to see what they would do. Someone who's essentially imbalanced and violent maybe grew more peaceful over time, but then still had that ability to just rage or turn it a different way, became more sadistic with the world, wants to see it burn. There's a lot of different things you can add to a person's portfolio of ideas.
Yeah, and that would have been something.
Yeah.
Too bad.
And also animating the quickening is also nice.
It's always so cool.
Everything gets to explode when you cut off somebody's head. Like, yeah, rock and roll.
I mean, that's not what's in the show, so it works.
Yeah, it was great. It was fun. It was just, I think, like I said, it was about having fun with the game. It was about having fun with ideas that sort of pop out and being able to say, like, hey, this is a cool moment right here. Let's focus on this and see what I can do. And by absorbing memories, we were able to transfer so much more information in interesting ways, because then you get points of view as well. And that I think was one of the most interesting things I worked on in terms of my career. And I'm just, hopefully I can release the videos someday and then show them because I'd really like to.
You got my attention though, very much so with that.
Yeah. And also there was like different groups. I mean, you watched the TV show, right?
Mm-hmm. The whole series.
Yeah. So yeah, the hunters and all those guys and people who knew you were immortal and how they would attack you versus other people. One thing we did in Highlander was to try to make death matter. Was to in any video game when you die, you just get reset like a few, to your last save game, and in a way death doesn't matter because you'll just restart from to try again, hopefully without a long reload. But one thing you wanted to do in Highlander is if you lost a sword fight and quote unquote died without your head getting cut off, you would have a moment where the people were taunting you, walking around, cleaning up, and then basically you would come back to life, and basically you'd stand up again, and then they would react to that and freak out. And that would give you a chance to kill them because that was what we wanted to do, is make death matter. In order for immortality to matter, death had to matter. And to make death matter, we had to make it meaningful. So and coming back to life, meaningful subsequently. So we did all kinds of stuff like that. Oh, another mechanic we had, I forgot to tell you, sorry to go off on this tangent.
Oh, no, you're good. I can talk about Highlander. No problem here.
The main character we had was a woman on this one. She had a ravine she had to cross, and she couldn't cross it. There's no way she could cross it. She had nothing. All she could do was take a deep breath and jump off a cliff and basically land. Do whatever it was going to do to her. And basically, we had her like landing in camera, basically with her neck broken and her body shattered, and then coming back to life again. And she's like slowly getting up and popping her bones back into place and her joints back into place. Just taking all this damage because she could. And
I think it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, but it sucks though. She's like popping her neck back into place. It was just really gruesome. But we called it beautiful damage. Basically, is our rule for it was. The rule that I created was called beautiful damage, and that we couldn't get too gruesome, like no bones sticking out of skin kind of thing. But we could basically twist someone's neck in really weird angles and then have her go and pop it back, which was a lot of fun. It was it was like one of those cool moments where you're like, oh my god, you got to have a lot of fun with this.
That sounds very cool.
Yeah, it was amazing fun.
Maybe one day we'll get a Highlander game of some sort, hopefully.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, with sometimes licensed properties, I'm sure that's got to be a hell to go through when it comes to depending on who owns what license or.
The problem is that the rights holder is he's basically he's of the old school type of designs where he basically wanted a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
For the designs, and you're like, no one's gonna pay that nowadays.
It's an old property too.
Yeah, exactly. And he basically thinks it's, worth a certain amount, but most game companies aren't willing to pay licensing fees anymore. The days of licensed gaming for properties is long gone because it doesn't work. There's no correlation for someone seeing a property and wanting to play it as a game. Even like Lord of the Rings had a hard time with it in terms of, capitalizing on the fame and translating that into direct game numbers versus other games which have been just successful, if not more so. So and also you don't own the property too. Like even if it's a successful game, you don't own that property. So for the game companies, it's less interesting, less appealing for them because they don't have the rights.
You can't really re-release it as we've seen many times in history now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's better for the rights holders to be the game company so that they can re-release it, or to have like seriously exclusive rights to it.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, why you get a lot of new IPs and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
I prefer anyway, because then you get more from that series when they own it.
Right, exactly.
Okay, that's all the questions that I had for you. Are there any last things that you might want to say? I think we covered most things, I'm assuming.
I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be able to speak with you. It was fun.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for that. I could talk Highlander all day, by the way. But first thing I want, before we wrap up, if you want to give a shout out to where people can find you on your Patreon.
Yeah, so if you go to Patreon and look up A Sanctuary of Kain, you'll basically find out like where I'm at with that. So it's basically right now it's just started, so I'm still putting stuff out there, but it's high-res paintings that are going out, sketches, scans from the original sketches, Discord talks, and merchandise are all being designed. So it's all a chance to actually have input on it. For people who sign up, they can actually have input on this design and what's coming up next for me. So something like maybe making vampire portraits for all the lieutenants and setting that up as a series so that people can frame them and put them up. And then finding ways to print those things. One thing I'm really interested in doing, I just have to explore it, is making a lenticular spectral painting of Raziel and being able to have it change, because that's one of my things I've always wanted to do, was lenticular painting. And then actually kind of a hologram that kind of changes as you roll it back and forth in your hands.
Oh, that sounds really cool, especially at Raziel.
Yeah, exactly. If it's a Soul Reaver, just sort of... I wanted to do that with the original Soul Reaver cover, and I talked to marketing about it and said it was too expensive, and then they went ahead and did it for the European version. I was like, you guys, look what Europe's doing. Because they had different marketing teams, and the European team was like, you have to do this. And I'm like, why?
It seems odd that, I guess different country, different areas, so, but...
Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of like really gorgeous like fan art out there. I like to give shout outs to those guys too. They're all doing amazing work. I just saw one that was a group that made the Soul Reaver intro in Dreams, and that was amazing to see. So it's all happening. It's all just stuff that I'm hoping to just again be able to contribute in some small way to the fandom and be able to continue some of the cool stuff that's been done. Even stuff like exploring the storyline after the series of Defiance. Or maybe seeing like way ahead of time and maybe doing some small graphic comics for it.
Okay. Hey, people love the series, and it's changed a lot of people's lives. I feel like from what I've seen in the Facebook groups.
Yeah, it was totally has. It was like something that I think still has a lot of power to this day because, again, we didn't treat people like idiots. We basically treated them like intelligent, thoughtful individuals who would understand what this story had to offer.
And Defiance, I can definitely see it in Defiance, where it didn't work out so well for me because I was being an idiot at that game, but I can see what you mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, if even in the storyline, if someone were to say something to you and not have to spell it out, it gives you a chance to talk about it with other people and see, like, what the greater messages are or the symbologies or those kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I want to thank you for coming on tonight with us.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Talking about this. And if you enjoyed this episode, definitely go check out all the other Legacy Kain episodes I have covered. We did Blood Omen 1, episode 19. In the 40s, we did Soul Reaver 2. I want to say it's I did not pull this up beforehand. But we have covered the whole series, episode 119 with the last one with Defiance. So definitely go check all those out if you haven't heard those yet. You can hear as we progress through the entire series, one by one, over the course of 2 years.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's great to be able to talk about the series. And hopefully with my Discord channel, I'll be able to even point out Easter eggs and things like that. People, maybe things people maybe have missed and be able to talk about those.
I'm sure people would love that because I'm sure there's a lot of Easter eggs that I missed and when I played through the series.
Oh, yeah. No, it's fun. You'll only be rewarded for it.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please go check out all the rest that we do. We do comics. We do movies. We are going through the MCU films, so definitely go check those out. We are almost finished with that series. And if you like our intro outro, courtesy of Bobby, a.k.a. Mike Stoney from ZP Bite the Bullet, Song to Cool Kid Squad, you will see a link in the show notes to his YouTube channel. Definitely go check him out. And we will see you guys all next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.